Engines rumbled in the private corporate parking garage. A wealthy CEO in a tailored suit leaned against his immaculate sports car, smirking. Across from him stood a young black employee with a dented old sedan, paint chipped, hood rattling lightly. The CEO laughed loudly. "My company is yours if you can outrun me with that junk." Employees gasped. Phones lifted to record. The young man simply tightened his grip on his keys and smiled. 5 minutes later, the CEO's grin vanished, replaced with disbelief. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from so we can bring more stories like these. The sun was barely up, and the city still had that hazy, bluish quiet when Malik rolled into the company lot in a car that really should have been in a scrapyard 10 years ago. At least, that's what everybody else thought. To them, it was just a busted old coupe with faded paint, mismatched panels, and a dent on the rear fender that looked like it had a story nobody cared to hear. The kind of car people parked away from so it wouldn't mess up their aesthetic on Instagram. To him, it was the cleanest thing he owned. He eased it into the far corner of the employee section, engine rumbling low and smooth. Nothing like the tired shell it pretended to be on the outside. He rested his hand on the steering wheel for a second, listening as the idle settled. "Still with me, old girl," he murmured with a small smile. "We good." He cut the ignition. The engine sighed into silence. Malik stepped out, closing the door gently, like the car was a living thing that deserved kindness. He was in his early 20s, dark skin, oil-stained hands no matter how hard he scrubbed, work shirt tucked in, ID badge clipped straight. There was a quiet calm about him, the kind that made people assume he was shy. He wasn't. He just chose his words carefully, the way he chose his bolts and tools, only when necessary. He slung his backpack over one shoulder and glanced up at the building towering over the lot. Hale Dynamics. Big glass, clean lines. The kind of office where the windows didn't open because nobody wanted fresh air messing up the AC. He still couldn't believe he worked there. A year ago, he'd been under busted hoods in a neighborhood garage, fixing engines for people who paid late and in cash when they could. Now he was a junior tech in one of the biggest automotive innovation companies in the city. Not some glamorous title, nothing impressive like lead engineer or development architect. Just junior support associate, vehicle systems. But it was a way in, and that's all he needed. He locked the car and started across the lot, sneakers crunching lightly on stray gravel. He kept his eyes forward, shoulders relaxed, head low enough not to draw attention, high enough not to look weak. He didn't like trouble, didn't want drama. He just wanted to work, learn, and go home in one piece. Inside the building, the world changed. Gone was the cracked asphalt and old oil stains. Here, everything was polished. Glass doors, stainless steel elevator frames, white marble floors that echoed every footstep like it was part of some corporate soundtrack. Malik swiped his badge at the turnstile. "Good morning, Malik," the automated voice buzzed. "Morning," he replied softly, almost out of habit, even though he knew the system didn't care. He passed by the lobby, where a giant digital display played the same highlight reel on loop. Commercials, awards, features in business magazines. And in the center of all that, Jonathan Hale, CEO, face on every article, hand in every deal, smile like a shark in a tailored suit. The video froze for a second on a shot of Jonathan standing next to one of his cars, a sleek black supercar that looked like it had been built for a movie villain. Text rolled under it. "Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing. Jonathan Hale." Malik shook his head, just a little. That man loves hearing himself, he muttered under his breath. Upstairs, the office was already buzzing, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, people rushing with coffee in hand, like caffeine was the only thing holding the whole place together. Malik slipped into his corner of the operations floor, sliding into his chair at a plain metal desk near the back. He opened his laptop, logged into the vehicle diagnostics system, and pulled up the day's queue. System checks, noise reports, support tickets from testing teams. Nothing flashy, nothing exciting, but it was his, and that was enough. Yo, early bird! He looked up. Dre, one of the other junior guys, slid into the next chair, hoodie half-zipped, lanyard twisted, chewing gum like it owed him money. You really be here before the janitors, huh? Dre grinned. Malik smirked. Beats rush hour. Dre snorted. Man, you ain't got rush hour. You got rust hour. Malik cocked a brow. What? Your little metal bucket outside. Dre laughed. Bro, that thing older than half the interns in here. Malik chuckled, turning his attention back to the screen. It gets me here. Barely, Dre shot back. Swear I heard it coughing when you pulled in. He wasn't the only one who noticed. Across the floor, two more coworkers walked by, paper cups in hand. That blue thing in the lot his? One whispered. Not quiet enough. Yeah, the other snickered. Looks like a dinosaur. I didn't even know cars from the 1900s still ran. They laughed and kept walking. Malik didn't flinch. He'd heard worse from better people. He clicked through a diagnostics report calmly, scanning for anomalies, fingers steady on the keys. Let them talk. His car ran better than half the premium rides in the lot. Only difference was, his didn't need a payment plan. On the top floor, another morning was unfolding. Jonathan Hale strode into the executive wing like he owned the air inside it, because in his mind, he did. Mid-40s, hair slicked perfectly back, watch that glinted every time he moved his wrist. Suit tailored sharp enough to cut. People greeted him with two bright smiles and two fast nods. Good morning, Mr. Hale. Great to see you, sir. Board loved your talk yesterday. Jonathan soaked it in. Of course they did, he said easily, dropping a leather bag on a glass table in the boardroom. Winning pitch! That's what I do. He slid into his chair at the head of the table, while a team of senior managers scrambled to set up for the morning briefing. He didn't ask if they were ready. He assumed they would be. Let's hear it, he said, waving a hand. They launched into numbers, graphs, projections. He half listened. His mind wasn't on employee satisfaction, or production schedules, or minor safety flags on test reports. His mind was on the things that made him feel alive. Closing the next deal, flexing in the next interview, choosing which car to show off in front of the building today. One of the VPs was droning on about budget allocations when Jonathan cut him off. Skip to the good part, he said. How's the stock reacting to yesterday's announce? The VP clicked to the next slide nervously. Up 3.2% in pre-market, sir. Jonathan smiled, slow and satisfied. That's what we like to see. He didn't ask how the people on the shop floor felt. Didn't care if overtime was burning them out. Didn't wonder if the junior staff could afford the gas it took to even get here. As far as he was concerned, employees were like parts in an engine. As long as they moved, he didn't have to think about them. Back downstairs, the morning rolled on. Malik got into a rhythm. Tickets in, tickets solved, tests queued for further review. He messaged teams, logged notes, kept his head down. Every so often, someone brought up his name, but never to his face. You see the guy in Bay 13? Yeah, the one with the dusty project car? He works here? Bet he can't even spell bonus. He heard one of those comments as he walked past the break room. He could have stepped in. Could have checked somebody. Could have asked them if their fancy leases survived the last economic dip. Instead, he just took a slow breath and kept walking. He'd spent his whole life around mouths that ran faster than minds. He wasn't about to let some office gossip throw his focus off. Near lunchtime, the parking lot started filling up more. Some people went out to get food, others just stepped out for air, pretending to make important calls while really scrolling social media. Malik headed out to his car with his lunch bag, leftover rice and chicken his mom had packed. He just wanted to sit in the quiet, lean the seat back, and breathe. He didn't plan where he parked. He just took the first open space he found near the shade, right next to a sleek, shining monster of a car. Jonathan Hale's. It sat low and growling, glossy paint catching every ray of light, logo shining. The kind of car that wasn't just meant to drive, it was meant to be seen. Malik glanced at it once, eyebrow lifting. "Must be nice," he murmured. He wasn't hating. He loved machines. Didn't matter if they were held together with zip ties or imported parts. If it had an engine and a story, he respected it. He climbed into his own car, set his food in his lap, rolled the window down halfway. Didn't notice the people starting to gather yet. Didn't see the cluster of employees near the entrance nudging each other. Didn't realize Jonathan Hale himself had stepped outside with a few senior staff, laughing loud and easy, gesturing toward the cars like they were props in his personal movie. Jonathan stopped mid-sentence when he saw it. His car, and next to it, Malik's. Old, faded, uneven, an eyesore. Right beside his pride and joy. Jonathan's lips curled. "Oh, you gotta be kidding me," he scoffed. The people around him followed his gaze, smirks already forming. "That thing even pass inspection?" someone joked. Jonathan chuckled, stepping forward just enough to make sure his voice carried. "Who parked that museum piece next to my car?" The few people laughed. Malik heard that part. He glanced over, eyes calm but alert. Met Jonathan's gaze just for a second, then looked back down at his lunch. He wasn't in the mood. Not today. Jonathan took that as disrespect, or worse, indifference. He couldn't stand either. He walked closer, voice rising. "Hey," he called out. "You work here?" Malik looked up again, swallowing a bite, nodding once. "Yes, sir." Jonathan glanced at the badge clipped to his shirt. "Vehicle Systems, Junior Support," he read, smirking. "Cute." A couple people snorted. Jonathan tapped the roof of Malik's car with 2 fingers, like he was knocking on a trash can. "This thing survived the 90s, or you dig it up from a junkyard last week," he said loudly. More laughter. Someone from the crowd murmured, "Man, don't do him like that," but quiet, under their breath. Malik wiped his hands on a napkin, still calm. "It runs," he said simply. "That's what matters." Jonathan raised his brows, amused. "That what matters?" he echoed. "See, that's a broke man answer. Out here, what matters is power, speed, status." He jerked his thumb toward his own car. "This is what matters." Phones started coming out of pockets. Not to defend, to record. Something in the air shifted, like everybody felt a line being drawn and stepped back to watch. Jonathan smiled, a shark sensing blood. For him, this was sport. For Malik, it was the first crack in a day that was about to split wide open. Because he wasn't just some kid with a rusted project car. He was a mechanic who knew engines like they were heartbeat rhythms. And under that peeling paint and old bodywork was a monster Jonathan didn't even know he'd just challenged. The moment Jonathan tapped the roof of Malik's car, The air in the parking lot shifted, like someone had turned down the oxygen just enough to make everyone hold their breath. Malik sat there quietly, lunch still in his lap, gaze steady. He wasn't embarrassed, wasn't angry. He'd been talked down to his whole life by people who didn't know half of what he could do with a wrench and an engine block. But he wasn't stupid either. He knew Jonathan Hale wasn't the type to walk away after one jab. Jonathan circled the car, like a predator eyeing its prey, hands tucked in his pockets, expensive shoes clicking lightly on the pavement. Seriously, Jonathan scoffed, scanning the faded paint. This thing looks like it survived the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs. A few employees laughed too loudly. That forced kind of laugh people use when they're scared to look out of place. Malik wiped his mouth with a napkin and stepped out of the car slowly. He didn't square up, didn't puff his chest, didn't get defensive. He just stood there, lunch bag in hand, calm as ever. "It gets me where I need to go," he said quietly. Jonathan raised both brows. "That's the problem. I didn't ask what it does. I asked why it's in my parking area." Malik blinked once. "This is the employee lot." "Yeah," Jonathan snapped. "And that," he pointed sharply at Malik's car, "belongs in the economy section, or better yet, behind the dumpster with the rest of the scrap metal." More laughter. Someone near the back muttered, "He wildin'," but nobody stepped in. Jonathan leaned against his own car, folding his arms. "You're new here, right? Junior something?" "Junior system support," Malik said. Right, Jonathan said dismissively. "Coffee run level, barely above intern." He grinned at his audience, soaking in their attention like a spotlight. Malik didn't correct him, didn't defend himself. He just said, "I do my job." Jonathan smirked. "Well, congratulations. Maybe one day you'll afford something that doesn't sound like it coughs when it starts." Malik let the insult fall off him like dust. But not everyone was so composed. Dre elbowed another coworker hard. "Bruh, he talking like he forgot some of us drive worse than that." The coworker whispered back, "Shh, you trying to get fired?" Across the lot, Sarah Mitchell stood quietly in the shade near the fence, watching. She'd seen Jonathan embarrass employees before, criticize their clothing, mock their desks, comment on salaries in front of others. He loved an audience. She hated an audience, hated attention, hated conflict. But she respected people who stayed calm under pressure. And Malik was on another level. She stepped forward a little, just enough to hear better. Jonathan pointed at Malik's car again. "You know what engines are good for?" he asked loudly. The crowd leaned in. "Speed," he said. "Power. Prestige. Not whatever that tin can of yours is squeaking around with." Malik's lips twitched, a tiny, almost smile. "You ever drive one like mine?" he asked softly. Jonathan barked a laugh. "Drive it? I wouldn't sit in it without a tetanus shot." Malik shrugged. "Then you wouldn't know." Jonathan stiffened. A few people gasped. That wasn't an insult, not attitude, just honesty. But honesty was dangerous with a man like Jonathan. "Oh, I get it," Jonathan sneered. "You think just because you know how to twist a wrench, you know something about cars?" Malik didn't answer. Jonathan smirked wider. "Tell you what, if that thing of yours can even make it around the company track without breaking down, I'd be surprised." Someone whispered, "Damn, he pushing it." Jonathan leaned in, voice low but audible to everyone. "People like you need to understand there's a place for skill and a place for ambition. Don't mix 'em up." Malik tilted his head slightly. "What place you put respect in?" he asked. The crowd froze. Jonathan blinked. "What?" "You got skill," Malik said calmly. "You got ambition. But I ain't heard you mention respect." Murmurs spread like wildfire. A few phones tilted higher, recording now with purpose. Jonathan felt the eyes on him and straightened. "Oh, I got respect," he said. "For people who earn it." He jerked his chin toward Malik's car. "That ain't you." Malik exhaled through his nose. Not angry, not defeated, just done talking. He nodded once and started turning back toward his car. But Jonathan wasn't finished. He liked the crowd, liked the attention, liked the feeling of dominance. "Hey," he called out. "Don't walk away. We ain't finished." Malik paused. Jonathan stepped forward, theatrically brushing invisible dust off his suit sleeve. "You know what?" he said loudly. "Maybe we should settle this mechanic versus millionaire debate right." The crowd leaned in. Jonathan smirked. "Oh yeah," he said. "This is gonna be good." He pointed boldly at Malik's car. "I challenge you," Jonathan announced, "to a race." A collective gasp rolled through the parking lot. "You and me," Jonathan continued, savoring every word. "One lap around the company track." People whispered like it was a basketball court fight unfolding. "That's wild. He ain't serious. He about to ruin that kid. This ain't even fair. Jonathan drives a damn missile." Jonathan held up a hand dramatically. "And let's make it interesting," he said, a spark in his eyes. He added, "If by some miracle you beat me, I'll sign my company over to you." Phones went up higher. Someone yelled, "Bro, what?" Jonathan grinned viciously. "But when I win, you're fired on the spot." Laughter, shock, gasps, excitement. Everyone looked at Malik. Sarah's heart thumped nervously. "No," she whispered under her breath. "Don't take it. He's setting you up." Malik looked right into Jonathan's eyes and breathed once. Slow, even. Then he said quietly, "Deal." The crowd exploded. "No way! He did not just say that. This is gonna be crazy. He signed his life away." Jonathan laughed so loud the sound echoed off the building. "Oh, this is gonna be fun," he smirked. Malik didn't flinch. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't show fear. He just walked back to his car and popped the hood. The crowd surged forward, and Sarah's eyes widened, because under that rusty hood wasn't an old engine. It was a masterpiece, silent, coiled, hidden, dangerous. She stepped closer, whispering, "Oh, he has no idea what he's..." By the time Jonathan strutted toward the company's private test track, half the staff was already there. Engineers, office workers, designers, accountants, interns, all buzzing with disbelief. People clung to balconies overlooking the track. Others crowded behind the safety railings, phones out, screens glowing. Someone even dragged out folding chairs from the break room, like it was a street performance. Jonathan loved it. He walked through the center of the crowd like a celebrity on a red carpet, waving, smiling, adjusting his expensive sunglasses. "You all might want to record this," he said loudly. "I'm about to teach our junior mechanic here a lesson in ambition." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Malik's car sat at the starting line, hood now down, engine quiet, paint still faded and unimpressive from the outside. He leaned against the door, gloves in hand, expression steady, not hyped, not scared, just ready. Jonathan strutted up to him, a smug grin plastered across his face. "You sure you want to go through with this, kid?" he asked, tapping Malik's shoulder patronizingly. "You can back out now. Save yourself the embarrassment." Malik slid his gloves on slowly, calmly. "I already agreed," he said quietly. Jonathan scoffed. "Right, 'cause you're trying to make a name for yourself. Cute." People in the crowd snickered. Sarah watched from the side, jaw set. She'd seen Jonathan humiliate people before, but this was different. This was targeted. Jonathan stepped closer, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Let me explain what's about to happen, since some of you might be confused, he said dramatically. He pointed at his own gleaming luxury supercar, black, aerodynamic, spotless. This beauty, he announced, costs more than your whole department's annual salary. He patted it like it was a pet. It's built for speed, for precision, for champions. Then he pointed at Malik's beat-up coupe. And that, he said loudly, is built for the junkyard. The crowd roared with laughter. Even some managers chuckled nervously, too scared to offend the CEO. Malik didn't say a word. He simply opened the driver's side door and climbed into his seat. Jonathan smirked. Oh, he's quiet now, he said mockingly, probably realizing he made a mistake. People murmured. Some laughed. A few looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Because in places like this, silence was safer than courage. Jonathan stepped in front of Malik's car, blocking the windshield, forcing him to look up. Look at me, Jonathan demanded. Malik lifted his eyes. Jonathan leaned down with a cold smile. When I win, Jonathan said slowly, I want you to walk your little toolbox out of this building and never come back. Understand? Malik stared at him calmly. You done? He asked. The crowd gasped softly. Jonathan straightened, annoyed. Oh, I'm just getting started, he snapped. Then he spun around to face the staff. Everyone, listen up! The space quieted instantly. Some people, Jonathan said theatrically, need to know their place. They need to understand there's levels in life, and not everyone belongs on the same level. Snickers ran through the onlookers. That's why this race is perfect, Jonathan continued. A simple demonstration. A beginner-level employee versus someone who actually knows what power looks like. Sarah clenched her jaw. That's enough, she muttered under her breath. But Jonathan wasn't finished humiliating Malik. He walked back toward Malik's car and slapped the hood once, hard. This thing should thank me, he said. It's the only time it'll ever be on a real track. The crowd laughed again. Loud, cruel, entertained. Malik slowly rolled the window down. Everyone leaned in. Jonathan smirked. What? You gonna give a speech before you lose? Malik looked up at him, voice quiet but sharp. You talk a lot, he said softly. The laughter died fast. Jonathan's smile twitched. What'd you say? He asked. I said, Malik repeated, you talk a lot. People sucked in breaths. Jonathan bristled, color rising in his face. This race is gonna be fun, Jonathan said, through clenched teeth. He stomped toward his supercar, yanking the door open dramatically and dropping into the seat like he was stepping into a throne. His engine roared to life, loud, aggressive, mechanical thunder. The crowd cheered. Malik turned his key. His engine rumbled low and controlled, a quiet growl that people almost didn't take seriously. But Sarah heard the difference. Her eyes widened. That's not stock, she whispered, the starting official. A nervous intern who had never done anything like this stepped forward, holding a clipboard. Okay, he stammered. Drivers ready? Jonathan revved the engine twice, showing off. Malik didn't even move his hands. His car just idled, steady and confident. Phone cameras lined the track on both sides. 200 employees watched. Jonathan flicked his sunglasses up and down like he was a movie star. Try not to die out there, he called across the track. Malik shifted into first gear with a soft click. Sarah watched him with narrowed eyes. He's not scared, she murmured. He's waiting. The intern lifted his hand. On my signal, a hush fell. The city seemed to hold its breath. The intern's hand trembled. 3, Jonathan revved his engine aggressively, smirking at the crowd. 2. Malik lowered his chin, focused, serious. 1. The intern dropped his arm. Jonathan's supercar shot forward with a scream, tires gripping the asphalt instantly, the force pressing him into his seat. The crowd roared. Ha! He's done! Look how fast Jonathan took off. That old car ain't keeping up with that. But then, Malik shifted once. A smooth, perfect transition. The coupe launched forward like it had been holding its breath until this exact moment. The engine roared alive. Deep, vicious, controlled. People's mouths fell open. What the? Yo, that thing moves? No way, no way. Jonathan had the early lead. But Malik's car? It wasn't running. It was hunting. Jonathan glanced in his rearview mirror and saw Malik closing in. Fast. Faster than he expected. He frowned. Impossible. He hit the gas harder. Malik shifted again. Smooth. Surgical. The gap shrank. People watching screamed. He's touching him. What is in that engine? That ain't no junk car, bro. At the halfway mark, Jonathan pushed a risky tight turn, trying to widen the lead. His rear tire skidded. The car wobbled for a split second, just enough. Malik slipped past the inside lane like liquid steel, engine singing. Jonathan cursed out loud. The crowd exploded in disbelief. Sarah gasped, "He's gonna win!" Jonathan slammed his foot down, trying to catch up, but Malik didn't even look back. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicking. He was driving like a man who built his machine bolt by bolt, who knew every sound, every breath, every limit. The finish line came into view, and Malik crossed it first. Clean, effortless, certain. The parking lot erupted. Screams, cheers, shouts, gasps. He won. No way. He beat Jonathan. His job is safe. Bro, he just took down the CEO. Jonathan rolled across the finish line seconds later, white-knuckled, humiliated, sweating. His sunglasses sat crooked on his face. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel. "No," he hissed. "No, no way." He stepped out, face red, chest heaving. Malik parked calmly, stepped out, shut his door gently. Jonathan pointed an accusing finger at him. "You cheated." The crowd quieted. Malik blinked once. "I won," he said simply. Jonathan's face contorted with rage, but before he could speak, Sarah stepped forward, confident, fearless, knowing something everyone else didn't. "Actually," she said loudly, "he didn't cheat." And for the first time, Jonathan realized this wasn't over. This was just the beginning of his humiliation. The crowd's roar died instantly the moment Sarah stepped forward. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But it carried, clean, steady, undeniable. "Actually," she repeated, eyes locked on Jonathan, "he didn't cheat." A ripple of murmur spread. Jonathan straightened, adjusting his crooked sunglasses, jaw tight. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by one of his own engineers. "And who exactly are you?" he demanded, trying to reestablish dominance. Sarah didn't flinch. "Sarah Mitchell, lead design engineer on powertrain diagnostics." A few people nodded in recognition. Jonathan blinked, slightly thrown off, but tried to brush it aside. "Well, Sarah, unless you're about to tell everyone he strapped a rocket to that thing." She cut him off politely, but firmly. "I watched the whole race. I inspected his car earlier. You're wrong, and you need to stop lying." Gasps, whispers, phones lifted higher. Jonathan's nostril. Now the whispers grew louder. "Yo, she really said that. She bold. Oh, this getting good. Jonathan took a step closer, looming over her. You accusing your CEO of wrongdoing, Miss Mitchell? She didn't move. I'm stating facts. She turned to the crowd and raised her voice, just enough. Earlier today, I saw his car. Malik rebuilt that engine himself. Every part legal. Every certification valid. Every modification fully documented. Malik stood still behind her, quiet, eyes lowered. He didn't ask for defense. Didn't expect backup. But someone was finally stepping forward, and that meant more than any victory lap. Jonathan scoffed loudly. Oh, please, that rusty heap? There's no way he built anything close to what my car can do. Sarah's eyes narrowed the smallest bit. You'd be surprised what real skill looks like when you stop measuring people by the cost of their toolbox. A few employees clapped quietly. Jonathan whipped his head toward them, and they stopped instantly. Sarah wasn't done. She clicked something on her phone, opening a folder of images and scans. These are the engineering notes Malik submitted when he applied for a technician apprenticeship last year, she announced. The board never reviewed them because someone, she glanced at Jonathan, flagged his file as underqualified. Another shockwave. Jonathan blinked. What? I never, Sarah cut him off again. And these, she continued, flipping to another file, are performance logs from Malik's car as he tested it after hours in the side lot. Perfect readings, legal mods, consistent stability, no red flags. Jonathan's mouth hung open. She wasn't done. Meanwhile, she said sharply, you raced on a wet track after safety protocols clearly stated the surface needed drying. You also pushed a corner turn above recommended speed. She angled her phone screen toward the crowd. A freeze-frame video clip showed Jonathan's car skidding dangerously at the halfway point. Had you hit the barrier, she added, you would have crashed into company property, possibly into the employees watching. People gasped. Some backed away from Jonathan instinctively. He opened his mouth to respond, but only air came out. And finally, Sarah said, voice steady as bedrock, there's this. She turned her phone one more time. A text message. A single line, sent from someone in the racing community. The message read, that kid, Malik, he was a street race legend before he turned 18. You could feel the shift in the crowd. A collective, oh, like someone finally connected all the dots. Malik lifted his head slowly. He didn't brag, didn't smirk, didn't flex. He simply acknowledged the truth with a calm, tired nod. Jonathan swallowed hard. A street racer? He stammered. What kind of? A skilled one, Sarah said sharply. A controlled one. A respected one. Someone who knows engines better than most people in our engineering department. Some employees murmured again. This time, with admiration. Jonathan's face went pale. Sarah stepped closer to him. Not aggressive, not disrespectful. Just direct. You didn't challenge a kid with a junk car, she said softly. You challenged a builder, a craftsman, someone who understands performance from the ground up. Jonathan clenched his fist. That doesn't change anything. It changes everything, Sarah responded, because you thought humiliating him would make you look powerful. All it did was reveal your ignorance. The crowd let out a sharp damn in unison. Jonathan looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to defend him, but every face he met held the same expression: disbelief, disappointment, and a kind of quiet satisfaction that comes when the bully finally gets caught. Jonathan pointed at Sarah angrily. You're out of line. She tilted her head slightly. No, I'm finally in the right place. Silence. Even the wind felt like it paused. Malik stepped forward, gently touching Sarah's arm, not to stop her, but to thank her. She gave him a small nod. Then she turned back to Jonathan and delivered the final blow. "You didn't lose to a junior employee," she said softly. "You lost to someone better than you." Jonathan's chest rose and fell sharply, his ego cracking, his authority slipping. The crowd murmured again. Sarah finished with one last line, voice strong and unwavering. "And the truth, Mr. Hale, is that you weren't beaten by a car. You were beaten by your own arrogance." Jonathan staggered back, like the words had weight, heavy weight. People whispered, recorded, stared. It was over for him, and the downfall had only just begun. The storm didn't hit all at once. It started small. A laugh here, a whisper there. A "yo, did you see that?" behind a hand. Then the phones came out. By the time Malik pulled his car off the track and parked it under the shade of the far fence, at least 20 different angles of that race were already being edited, zoomed, slow-moed, and sent to every group chat in the building. He sat for a second, with the engine off, hands still on the wheel, listening as the metal ticked, but that wasn't him. He just closed his eyes for a moment and whispered under his breath, "Told you we still had it, girl," giving the dashboard a soft tap. Near the pit area, Jonathan hadn't moved. He stood beside his supercar, chest heaving, one hand on the roof like he needed it to hold him up. His jaw was clenched so tight a vein pulsed near his temple. He kept replaying it in his head, his launch, his lead, that stupid wide turn. The way that old, ugly car had slid past him like it owned the road. The part that really dug into him, the look on Malik's face when he'd stepped out the car. No gloating, no fear, just calm, like this was nothing new, like winning was just another Tuesday. The crowd that had been roaring minutes ago now hovered in weird, hungry silence, half of them watching Jonathan, half watching Malik, all of them waiting to see what happened next. Some employees were clearly thrilled. Others were terrified, because they knew what a man like Jonathan did when backed into a corner. He lashed out. "He cheated!" Jonathan shouted again, louder this time, desperate enough that his voice cracked a little. Nobody clapped. Nobody backed him. They just watched. Dre, standing near the fence, shook his head. "Man, just take the L." Jonathan spun around, eyes wild. "What'd you say?" Dre straightened. "Nothing, sir." Sarah stepped closer to Jonathan and Malik, her phone still in her hand, thumb hovering over the screen where all the texts, images, and logs sat waiting. "You didn't lose because he cheated," she said. "You lost because you underestimated him." We already been through that part. The words were still hanging in the air like smoke. Now the wind started blowing. Someone from HR whispered into their headset, already on a call with upstairs. "Yeah, no, you need to see this yourself. Somebody tag legal too." A couple of project managers slipped away quietly, heading inside with faces pale and serious. On the upper balcony, a board member who'd just stopped by leaned on the railing, watching the scene with narrowed eyes. The story wasn't just a story anymore. It was evidence. Phones buzzed everywhere. Group chats lit up. "Yo, this man really bet the company sent you the vid. He offered to fire dude if he lost. This gonna be bad for him. Like, lawsuit bad. Why he so obsessed with flexing? The kid dusted him clean." Inside the building, people who hadn't made it to the track gathered around screens in the break room and conference rooms. They watched Jonathan's mouth move in slow motion, watched his finger in Malik's face, watched the moment he made the bet, watched him lose, replayed it again and again. By the time Malik had pushed his hood up and was checking a minor rattle that only he could hear, the whole company knew what went down. and it wasn't staying inside those walls. One of the interns, heart pounding, hesitated over the send button to a friend outside the company. "You think I should?" he asked his buddy. His friend nodded without looking away from the screen. "Oh yeah? World needs to see rich boy get humbled." Click. Sent. The storm rolled outward. Back on the track, Jonathan was still trying to hold on to control. "I'm not signing anything," he snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It was a joke. You all know that. Nobody's taking this seriously except him." He jerked a thumb toward Malik. Malik just wiped a grease smudge off his wrist with a rag. Sarah crossed her arms. "You made the terms in front of half the company," she said. "On company property, using company assets. You can't walk that back like it was a prank." "Oh, what are you now, my lawyer?" he shot back. "No," she replied, "but legal will be very interested." That landed. He looked up toward the balcony and saw the board member step away from the rail, phone already at their ear, walking back into the building with quick, purposeful strides. A knot formed in his stomach. This felt different. Bigger than office gossip. Bigger than wounded pride. He tried to pivot. "Everybody calm down," Jonathan said, forcing a laugh that sounded way too thin. "It was just a morale thing. A little fun. I wasn't actually gonna—" "Fire him?" someone shouted from the crowd. "You said it 3 times. "Yeah, we got you in 4K, another voice chimed in. There was a nervous wave of laughter at that. Not the entertained kind from earlier, but the kind people use when they know something is far beyond their pay grade and spiraling. Security drifted closer to the railings. Not to protect anyone from Malik, to protect the company from Jonathan. Sarah lifted her phone, glanced at one more message she'd received earlier, then looked Jonathan dead in the eye. "You weren't racing him for fun," she said quietly. "You were racing to humiliate him, to remind everyone you're the top dog." Jonathan scoffed. "So what if I wanted to teach him a lesson about staying in his lane?" "You did," she said, "just not the lesson you thought." Behind Jonathan, someone spoke up. It was the parking guard, the same one who'd told Malik earlier to stay out of the premium section. His voice shook a little, but he spoke anyway. "Sir, he never bothered nobody," the guard said quietly. "He comes in early, leaves late, treats everyone decent. You the one that kept picking at him." The crowd shifted. Some heads nodded. Jonathan stared at the guard like he'd lost his mind. "Oh, so now the parking lot patrol's giving feedback too?" he snapped. Bad move. That one line hit a nerve it wasn't supposed to. You could see it in the faces around him. People who'd been stepped on, overworked, underpaid, talked down to. People who'd kept quiet because rent was due and health insurance wasn't cheap. Now, they'd just watched one of their own stand up without even raising his voice. It did something to them. "You always do this," someone else muttered. "Every time there's a crowd, you need somebody to clown." Another. "Man, if he hadn't won, we'd be walking Malik out right now. Y'all know that." It wasn't a chant. Wasn't a revolt. Not yet. But it was the crackle before lightning. Jonathan's phone buzzed in his pocket. Again. 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 He ignored it. Then it buzzed once more. The tone he'd assigned specifically for board contacts. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen. Board line. Priority. His throat went dry. He answered anyway. "Yeah?" He turned slightly away from the crowd. But not enough that people couldn't still see the color drain from his face. "Right now?" he repeated. A pause. "No, we don't need to. I can handle this. It's just a misunderstanding with a—" He swallowed, jaw tightening. "Yes, I understand. I'll come up." He hung up slowly. The arrogance on his face didn't vanish all at once. It slid off in pieces, little chunks of certainty crumbling under pressure. He looked back at Malik, who was now standing beside his car, arms folded loosely, eyes unreadable. "This isn't over," Jonathan muttered. Malik simply nodded once. "Didn't say it was," he replied. Sarah stepped closer to Malik after Jonathan walked off, surrounded by silence that followed him like bad perfume. "You okay?" she asked. He shrugged. "I've been okay. I'm just tired." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "You know what he's going upstairs to face, right?" "Yeah," Malik said. "The storm." She watched him for a second, studying the way he handled all of this. The racism, the class digs, the public trash-talking, the high-stakes bet like his life was a game. "You knew you were gonna win," she said finally. He shook his head. ... "Nah," he said. "I knew I could. That's the same thing." He looked at her. "No," he corrected gently. "One is arrogance. The other is trust in the work you put in." She smiled slightly at that. Around them, the crowd slowly started to break apart. People headed back inside, not because they lost interest, but because they wanted to be close to where the real impact was about to hit. Conversations buzzed in every hallway. Board called him. "He's finished." "You think they'll really hold him to the bet?" "At minimum, legal's gonna feast off this." "I feel bad for him. Kinda." "I don't." In the break room, someone turned the volume up on a news segment about corporate responsibility, irony hanging thick in the air. In HR, emails were already being drafted. In legal, people were pulling policies and liability clauses. On the executive floor, the boardroom lights were on. Jonathan was walking into a very different kind of race now, one he couldn't win with horsepower. And down by the track, under the afternoon sun, Malik leaned on the roof of his old, beautiful, underestimated car and took a slow breath. He didn't smile big, didn't pump his fist, didn't dance. He just stood with quiet satisfaction, not because he'd beaten a rich man, but because for once, the truth had outrun the lie. And that was a win you didn't need a finish line to measure. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime that didn't match the heaviness in the air. Jonathan Hale stepped out onto the executive floor, the carpet thicker, the lights softer, the silence sharp as a blade. Yet for the first time in years, 2 security officers followed behind him, not touching him, not threatening, just escorting. Anyone watching would understand the message. This wasn't a CEO walking into a meeting. This was a man walking into judgment. Every employee working on that floor found a reason to step into a doorway or slip out of sight, pretending they weren't watching. You couldn't blame them. Jonathan Hale never came up here called by someone else. He summoned people. He commanded meetings. He ran the show. But today, the show had ended before he even stepped off the elevator. The boardroom doors were already open. 8 members sat around the long glass table, their tablets glowing with footage, messages, timestamps, evidence. A storm of it. Jonathan took one look inside and froze, because sitting quietly near the end of the table, arms crossed, calm as morning rain, was Malik, the kid whose name he barely knew, the kid he tried to embarrass, the kid he'd bet his entire company against. For a second, Jonathan considered backing away. For the first time in his life, he felt small. "Come in, Jonathan," the board chair said, voice clipped. "We've been waiting." Jonathan forced a smile, more like a grimace. "Look, guys, I think things got blown out of proportion. It was a morale exercise, a joke that—" "Sit," the chair said. It wasn't a suggestion. Jonathan obeyed like a man walking into his own funeral. The air crackled with tension. The blinds were half closed, slicing the room into sharp shadows. One of the board members tapped the screen of her tablet. The video played. Jonathan's voice echoed through the speakers. "If you beat me in a race, I'll sign the whole company over to you." Laughter, crowd noise. Jonathan taunting. "But if you lose, you're fired." Someone paused it. The still image showed Jonathan pointing in Malik's face, a perfect snapshot of arrogance. Jonathan swallowed. I didn't mean it was—" "We have multiple angles," another board member said. "Multiple witnesses. Legal's already drafted concerns about coercion, workplace hostility, public humiliation, endangerment." "Endangerment? Oh, come on." Sarah stepped forward. "Wait, Sarah?" She'd been standing against the wall, quietly, just far enough in shadows that Jonathan hadn't noticed. Now, she moved into the light, like she'd been waiting for the cue. She held a thick folder, diagrams, printouts, certification forms. ... "Mr. Hale," she said evenly, "you accused him of cheating. I'd like to formally present the engineering inspections on Malik's car." She handed the documents to the board. "They're legal, safe, registered, and rebuilt with better craftsmanship than anything in our company garage." A few board members exchanged impressed looks. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Sarah continued. "And here," she said, dropping another set of papers, "are the reports showing you broke company safety protocol by using the track after rainfall, something the manual says is strictly prohibited." Another board member leaned back, eyebrows raised. "So he violated company rules?" someone murmured. "That's not all," Sarah said softly. She turned to Malik. "You want to tell them?" Malik shook his head. She looked back at the board. This wasn't a race between equals. Mr. Hale used his position to mock a junior employee, to publicly degrade him, to threaten his livelihood. She clicked her tablet. Another clip played from the warm-up area. Jonathan laughing with a group of staff. "I'm gonna bury that kid. Watch this. Man brought a junkyard car to a knife fight. I can't wait to fire him." Jonathan winced, like each line was a punch, but Sarah wasn't done. "In engineering," she said quietly, "we know something Mr. Hale forgot." Her voice softened, but it didn't get weaker. It got sharper, colder. He thinks power comes from money. He thinks status makes him untouchable. He thinks being rich makes him superior. She turned to Malik. "But this man? This humble guy you called a nobody?" She took a breath. "He wasn't racing you for a job. He was racing to prove something you couldn't understand." The room leaned in. Jonathan froze. Sarah finished. "He didn't race to win your company." She looked straight at Jonathan. "He raced to show you that you never deserved it." The words cracked through the room like a lightning bolt. Jonathan's breath hitched. Malik looked down at his hands. The board looked like they'd just watched a documentary, a confession, and a trial, all in one. Jonathan stood abruptly, chair scraping back. "You're all insane," he snapped. "I built this place. I made this company. You humiliated an employee," the chair interrupted. "You violated safety rules," another said. "You endangered your staff," added a third. "You made a reckless business wager on video," someone else said. "And you lost," the chair finished. Silence. Long. Heavy. Final. Security stepped forward. Jonathan's voice cracked. "You firing me?" "No," the chair said calmly. "We're removing you as CEO." Jonathan stared in disbelief. "This is my company," he whispered. Malik finally looked up, not with anger, not with triumph, but with something like quiet mercy. "No," Malik said gently. "It was your company, Jonathan stumbled backward as security guided him toward the door. He didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't fight. He just kept staring at Malik, as if trying to understand how he lost everything to a man he never looked at twice. The boardroom door closed behind him. Soft click, like a period at the end of a sentence. Sarah exhaled shakily. Malik rubbed the back of his neck. The board chair stood and walked around the table. "We'd like to talk to you, Malik," he said, "about your future here." And for the first time all day, Malik actually smiled. The conference room felt completely different now that Jonathan was gone. Like someone had cracked open a window in a house where the air had been stale for years. No raised voices, no fear choking the room, just a heavy, settling silence, the kind that follows a storm when the sky is trying to remember what calm feels like. Malik stood near the wall, hands tucked into his pockets, trying not to fidget. He wasn't used to being in rooms like this, rooms with glass tables, leather chairs, and people whose watches cost more than his. He felt out of place. But for the first time in his life, no one treated him like he didn't belong. The board chair gestured toward a seat. "Have a seat, Malik." He hesitated. "I'm good standing, sir." Another board member smiled, a genuine one, not the corporate kind. "You're allowed to sit at the table," she said softly. It wasn't a command, it was an invitation. So Malik sat. Awkward at first, then a little straighter. Across the table, Sarah took a chair too. "We're not offering pity," another board member said. "We're offering opportunity." That made Malik look up. The chair slid a folder across the table toward him. "We reviewed your file. You've been here for 2 years. Never late, never missed a day. Employees speak highly of you. Your supervisors rely on you." Another board member added, "You rebuilt a vehicle from the frame by yourself. That takes engineering intuition some people spend 6 years in college trying to learn." Malik swallowed. He wasn't used to praise, especially not from people dressed in suits. "We'd like to sponsor your degree," the chair said. "Full scholarship, mechanical engineering, if that's what you want." Malik froze. A scholarship?" He sounded like he didn't trust the words. "Yes," the woman said. "Not a loan, not a trap, a real investment in you." And, another board member added, "We'd like to offer you a leadership track position in our engineering division." Malik leaned back, breath. "Leadership?" he echoed. I'm a mechanic." Sarah finally spoke. "No," she said gently. "You're an engineer who never got the chance." His eyes softened. "This is your chance," she continued. "Take it." The chair slid a second document forward. "This is a permanent contract, better pay, benefits, real influence. You'd be working under our senior engineering director." Malik stared at the papers, blinking slowly. Then he shook his head. "No, I can't take his company. I don't want what ain't mine." The board chair smiled. "You're not taking Jonathan's company," he said. "You're helping rebuild the one he almost destroyed." That hit Malik hard. Harder than any race. Harder than any insult he'd ignored. He rubbed the back of his neck, his thinking habit. I just want respect," he murmured. "And you've earned it," the chair said. "The real question is, do you want the future that comes with it?" Malik inhaled slowly, then nodded once. "I'll take it." Sarah smiled quietly, relief washing across her face. The board signed the papers on their side, then pushed the pen toward him. Malik signed with steady hands, not shaky, not scared, ready. By the time Malik stepped out of the boardroom, employees were pretending not to be nosy, but every head popped up over cubicle walls the moment the door opened. Somebody whispered, That's him. Another. Bro really beat the CEO and kept his job? Someone else. He ain't just keep it, he leveled up. Malik gave a small nod to the people staring. Not prideful, just a gesture that said, "Yeah, we good." Downstairs, security escorted Jonathan Hale through the lobby. Not in cuffs, nothing dramatic. Just two officers walking sternly beside him as he carried a single cardboard box, corporate exile in its purest form. People streamed out of offices, pretending to be heading somewhere, just to watch Jonathan go. Some employees folded their arms, some looked away, some whispered. Jonathan didn't look at anyone. He just kept walking, eyes glued to the floor, like a man carrying the weight of every mistake he ever made. When he reached the revolving doors, he paused. And for the first time since the track, he looked back. Not at the board, not at the executives, at Malik. Their eyes met through the glass. Jonathan opened his mouth as if to speak, but Malik just nodded once, calm, respectful. A quiet acknowledgement that said, "What's done is done." ... Jonathan lowered his eyes and walked out into the sunlight. No cameras waiting, no admirers, no luxury car. Just a man who'd lost everything because he thought he was better than someone who'd been better all along. Later that afternoon, Malik stood beside his old car, touching the hood gently. Sarah approached holding 2 coffees. "So," she said, handing him one, "engineering division, huh?" Malik chuckled. "Yeah, guess so. You deserve it." He shrugged with a shy smile. "You helped." "Not really," she said. "You earned it. I just made sure people looked." He tightened a bolt near the engine, still smiling. "You sticking around to see if I crash and burn?" She shook her head. "No, I'm sticking around to see what you build next." Malik looked up at her, sincere, grateful. "Whatever it is," he said, "it's gonna be built right." And for the first time that day, he let himself feel proud. Not for beating Jonathan, not for winning a race, but for proving what he always knew. Respect couldn't be bought. It had to be earned. And he earned it the right way. The garage was quiet. The kind of quiet that settles after truth has finally spoken loud enough, long enough, to change something. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the high windows, painting long bars of gold across the concrete floor. Dust floated gently in the beams, drifting like tiny memories. Malik stood in front of his car, the same beat-up machine everyone at the company used to laugh at. The same car they said belonged in a junkyard. The same car Jonathan swore could never outrun anything worth money. Malik laid a hand on the hood with a soft tap, like thanking an old friend. He exhaled slowly, not tired, just full. Full of everything that had happened, all the weight and all the release that came after. The engine clicked quiet as it cooled. Somehow, even that sounded like a heartbeat calming down after a long fight. He stepped back, leaning against the workbench he'd rebuilt from scrap wood. The garage smelled of oil, metal, and something warm. Pride. Not arrogance, not ego, just the clean, honest kind of pride that comes from surviving something someone else thought would break you. He looked at the car again and chuckled under his breath. "People judge what they can see," he said softly, echoing his own thoughts. "Never what's under the hood." His words didn't echo much. The room absorbed them gently, as if giving them a place to rest. A moment later, footsteps approached. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her silhouette bright against the outside sun. "You are still here," she said, walking in with an easy smile. Malik shrugged, eyes still tracing the lines of his car. "Guess I just needed a minute." Sarah stood beside him without touching anything, just present, quiet, respectful. You know, she said softly, today wasn't really about a race. Malik nodded slowly. Yeah, he replied. It was about everything else. He took a breath. Folks been laughing at this car for years, laughing at me, judging me before I even opened my mouth. He paused, voice calm. But today, people had to see the truth, not the noise, the truth. Sarah folded her arms, watching him with something like admiration. Skill whispers, she said. Malik smiled, a small, grateful one. Arrogance screams, he finished. Silence settled again, but this one felt peaceful. He walked around the front of the car, fingers brushing the scratched paint. You know what I learned today? Malik said, voice low but steady. That respect ain't about money, titles, cars, any of that. He placed his hand on the driver's side door. It's about how you treat people you think ain't important. He looked up at her, eyes clear, stronger than she'd ever seen them. Jonathan thought folks like me were beneath him. He thought kindness was weakness. He thought his money made him untouchable. He shook his head, a quiet sadness passing across his face before fading. But life don't work like that. Eventually, everybody's character shows. Sarah leaned against the workbench, listening. Malik continued softly. You can buy cars. You can buy buildings. You can buy status. He tapped his chest lightly. But you can't buy integrity. You can't buy heart. You can't buy humility. The sunlight shifted slightly, landing on his face, warm and clean. You gotta earn those, he said. He pulled a cloth from his pocket and wiped a smudge off the fender. Funny thing is, after everything today, I don't feel like I won something. Sarah looked confused. You don't? Malik shook his head with a small laugh. Nah, I just feel like I finally stopped losing. That hit her hard. He continued, all my life, people judged me by what they saw. My skin, my paycheck, my old car, my clothes. He paused, looking toward the garage door where sunlight streamed in. But today, judged me by my actions, my skill, my patience, my dignity. Sarah walked closer, stopping beside him. You earned everything you got today, she said softly. He nodded. Yeah, but not by shouting, not by showing off, not by trying to look big. He smiled gently, just by being me. He wiped the last bit of grease from the hood and placed the cloth down. Then he said it, the final quiet truth of the day. Never let somebody's loud ego drown out your quiet worth. Sarah felt a chill at his words. Not fear, inspiration. He reached out and flicked off the garage light. The space dimmed, but the sunlight still poured through the cracked door. A calm, hopeful glow. Malik walked toward it. In the end, he murmured, almost like a voiceover to his own life, the real race was never on that track. He stepped into the sunshine. It was the race to stay true to myself, even when the world tried to shame me. Sarah followed, matching his pace. And I won that one the moment I didn't back down. The camera, if this were a film, would pan back as the garage door closed slowly behind them. Two figures walking side by side. No Ferrari, no crowds, no noise, just dignity. And a man who finally took his rightful place in the world, not because he demanded respect, but because he proved he deserved it. End.